The TCU secondary will be the biggest key in this football game against Texas Tech. I'll talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're presented by FanDuel today. You can make bets on the FanDuel app or at FanDuel.com. One $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets. Coming to you on a Thursday. TCU takes on Texas Tech at 2:30 on Saturday. Let me get one thing out of the way for the YouTube audience. I've worn this hat before on YouTube, and people have gotten very upset because they say, why are you wearing a Michigan hat on a TCU podcast? This is not a Michigan hat. The Block M is for McGregor, which is where I grew up and played high school football. So that's what it is. I haven't worn it in a long time on the show because people were confused, and I understand that. I also just don't really think about what I wear on the show because I do this every day. And so I'm kind of just like getting dressed for work or whatever. And then it's like, oh, this is what I'm wearing today. But just to alleviate any concerns, this is not a Michigan hat, McGregor hat, McGregor, Texas. That's who I'm repping on the show today. And we're always repping the TCU Horned Frogs on Locked On Horned Frogs. Big game against Texas Tech this week. For one, from a record perspective, a chance to get to 5-3 on the year, which following that loss to Houston at home will be a huge deal. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect moving forward. They responded really nicely out of the bye week. They get the win against Utah. A lot of things to clean up from that game, especially offensively. But my main focus this week, as we look at the Tech ball game, has been how can this TCU defense hold up? I believe that the TCU offense should be able to get some things going and get back on track this week against a Tech defense that has really struggled, both in scoring defense, but also, especially in the pass game, giving up a lot of yards. They rank just above TCU in rushing yards given up per game, and we know how much TCU has struggled in the run game this year. So that side of the ball has been an issue for Joe McGuire's team. Now, they have had a couple games this season against Arizona and Arizona State where they played pretty well. And in both those games, the culprit that stalled those offenses out was turnovers. TCU's issue on offense this year, in a lot of ways, has been unforced errors and turnovers. So that is something to watch, and we'll get to some more keys to the game later. But I think the biggest key to this football game is the TCU secondary. And the reason I say that, in the two games this year against Power 4 opponents where TCU has played well on defense, the Stanford ball game, where especially in the second half, it looked like a confident group that was flying around, making plays, really limiting that Stanford offense. And honestly, while the TCU offense was kind of getting their rhythm and getting their footing under them, gave them a chance to win that game, and eventually they did come back and get the victory. And then last week against Utah, two things, or really one thing, has been a common thread for me. They have been able to sell out and stop the run, be aggressive in rushing the passer and bringing blitzes and bringing pressures, which coming into the year was something that Andy Avalos was known for. We were excited about it as fans because Joe Gillespie was so conservative in his play calling. And they were able to do that and get home and make plays in the run game. And on the back end, the secondary played well. Now, in that Stanford game, many of you will remember, the referees that night let them play very physically, JT Broughton especially, and those one-on-one matchups in the sideline was getting after those wide receivers. But, I mean, he played within the limitations of how they called that game, and he played well. Since then, the passing defense has had their issues. Now, I think Lamarian James overall has played really well this season. Had some tough moments against Houston, but by and large, he's having a good year. The other side at corner has been a problem. And lately, I wouldn't say it's been a revolving door. They've mixed Channing Canada in the game as well. Your snap count totals from that game against Utah, Lamarian James played 45 snaps. Travis Broughton played 41. Channing Canada played 36. And then Austin Jordan played 24. And you might not recognize that name, but Austin Jordan was a transfer from Texas in the offseason. He's played some safety. He's played some corner in his career. Played pretty much all his snaps at corner. I guess all his snaps at corner in that game against Utah. And he graded out those snap counts courtesy of Pro Football Focus. His grade from Pro Football Focus was 66. Channing Kanda at 62. Travis Broughton at 45. Lamarian James at 54. Broughton gave up that long touchdown pass to Parks. But other than that, the secondary played at a high level. And TCU brought pressure. They played a lot of man coverage. And the back end of the defense was able to hold up well. And there were some sacks that Isaac Wilson had in that game that were coverage sacks. I mean, he went through his progressions. There was nothing there. He tried to break contain in the pocket, couldn't do it. And that allowed Devin Deal and Marcel Brooks and Caleb Alarm-Zor to get home and make plays behind the line of scrimmage. So this defense has been most successful when they've been able to play that way. Play aggressively, stop the run, get after the quarterback, and allow your corners to play on an island. The issue with Tech is, when you look at this offense led by Baron Morton, their quarterback, the first thing that everybody says is, how do you stop Taj Brooks? I said this, I guess it was in yesterday's show. Taj Brooks by himself has more rushing yards than the TCU team this year. He's got 804, I believe, yards on the season. He's having another outstanding year. He's a tough back. He doesn't go down easily. That O-line has opened up lanes for him. He's getting it done. And against teams that have been able to be balanced, like SMU, like UCF, in both those teams, they were able to run the ball really at will. And then off of that, they started having success in the pass game because suddenly you have to account more resources to the run game, and they could make you pay. KJ Jefferson found Kobe Hudson, and he had a really good game in that UCF contest, especially in the second half. SMU had multiple third and longs where Kevin Jennings made plays with his arm. So I feel like you have to stack the box and, one, try to slow down Taj Brooks. And then along with that, bring pressure, bring extra rushers at Baron Morton. The problem is Tech's got some really good wide receivers that are going to be tough to lock up in man coverage. Josh Kelly's having an outstanding season. 53 receptions, 590 yards, 3 touchdowns. Caleb Douglas, 419 yards, 4 touchdowns. Coy Eakin, 5 touchdowns, 339 yards. And then you add into that a guy like Micah Hudson, true freshman, 5-star recruit from Lake Belton, who hasn't played a lot, but had a huge one-handed catch against Baylor last week. I don't know if the coaching staff is chomping at the bit to get him in the game. It certainly sounds like the fans are saying, like, hey, we want to see this guy on the field more. Get him more opportunities. Can your corners, are they up to the challenge in this ball game? Because if you sit back and allow Taj Brooks to run against light boxes, then I think you're going to see a lot of 2nd and 4, 3rd and 2, 2nd and 3, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 1. And that's not a way to live. It's not a way to live, one, because it's just hard to get teams off the field on 3rd down when they're in 3rd and manageable. They have the whole playbook open to them. They can run the ball. They can pass the ball. They put you in tough situations as a defense. It's also not a way to live against this Tech team because Joey McGuire is a big believer in analytics. Now, I was watching the Baylor Tech game last week, and the announcer said that he's kind of slowed down on the all gas, no brakes approach with the 4th down conversions. And he's still using the charts that tell you, like, there's just charts that spit out probabilities and say, hey, at this field position, if it's 4th and less than this, you should go for it, right? The probability is in your favor. He's gotten away from that a little bit and is balancing, like, okay, what does my gut say and what does the chart say? What is this? What's the game looking like? How is this going? Is this a defensive football game? Is this an offensive football game? But Tech is known for going for it on fourth down. So on 3rd and 2, if they don't get it, they're willing to line right back up and come at you again. So I feel like Andy Avalos has to bring an aggressive game plan to the table. And if they're just killing you through the air, maybe you adjust. But with the balance they have, it's kind of a pick your poison situation. And the best case scenario is, can you allocate more resources to the run game, find a way to slow down Taj Brooks, and allow your corners to play on the outside in a lot of man coverage situations. And your safeties too. It comes down to them as well. Bud Clark coming off a really nice game. Jamal Johnson looks more comfortable. But can those guys in the secondary lock up and make plays and make life hard on these Tech wide receivers? Because if they can't, I think this game gets really dicey. Even though I believe, this should be a week where you score points. If you get in a shootout, suddenly offensive efficiency is at a premium. And you got to find a way to score and finish drives with touchdowns. TCU has struggled to do that lately. Also very interested to see on offense what the splits look like from a running back perspective snap-wise. They give Trent Battle some more opportunities. But going back to the defense, I think one thing that you can do in this scenario, if you're going to leave your corners on an island frequently, rotate them in and out more, right? We saw Austin Jordan get in the game and get more run against Utah. We saw, and that could be that could just be a matchup thing. Utah running a lot of sets, heavier sets with tight ends in the game, and since Jordan has a background as a safety, playing in the slot, playing against some bigger bodied wide receivers and tight ends, that's an area where he could be comfortable. But give him some opportunities. Javon McIver is apparently healthy. I don't think you can afford to play him for a lot of snaps because that's a tough ask to say, hey, your first snaps of the season, run out there and guard a really good Tech wide receiver crew on a down-to-down basis in man coverage. That's a tough thing to do. But maybe just to give him a different look, throw him out there. Give Channing Canada some more opportunities. I think Lamarian James is going to play a lot. And I believe that as a competitor, he's up to the challenge of, all right, I want to be in these situations. I'm worried about the other side at the corner spot. And can they come up with plays and make things happen? But I think that's the biggest key to this ball game. And I'll talk more about, keys to the game, 1, 2, 3 in Friday's episode and make an official prediction. But can you find a way to be aggressive, slow down Taj Brooks, not allow him to just do what he wants in the run game? To do that, you have to hold up in the secondary. And this Tech team, I think this is it's the most prolific pass offense they've seen all year. It feels like the best. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough week for this defense. Are they up to the challenge, and can they make those plays? That'll be a huge key to this ball game. In a lot of ways, I think you'll decide how the game goes and if TCU wins or loses. When we come back, an interesting article yesterday from Mac Engel about the 2014 team not getting recognized at the upcoming game against Texas Tech. We'll talk about that next round. Locked on Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. Shout out to FanDuel. FanDuel is where the game starts. You can go to FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Download it today. One $5 bet. Get you $200 in bonus bets. College football, NFL, World Series starting Friday. Dodgers and Yankees. That'll be fun. Two really good teams. A lot of star power. Obviously, big markets involved in this one. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. You can bet on this Texas Tech TCU game. All the Big 12 actions there. FanDuel. It's where the game starts. Official betting partner of the NFL and a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So Mac Engel from the 4-Star Telegram, he wrote a column yesterday about this weekend being a big weekend to remember some former teams that did some special things at TCU. So they're honoring the 1984 Bluebonnet Bowl team, the 1994 Independence Bowl team, and the 2014 Peach Bowl team, which I was a student in 2014. That was my senior year. I think that's the best TCU team of all time. I know some people will say 2010. I get it. Just offensively, defensively, they were loaded. From a talent perspective, Gary did an outstanding job getting motivated to play. They went 12-1, had that hiccup against Baylor in the comeback. They won a Big 12 championship. I don't care what Baylor people say. That was a Big 12 championship. It counts. It was the title. Co-champions, but you know what I mean. And they destroyed Ole Miss in the Fiesta Bowl. It was the most fun I've ever had as someone who follows this team. They were amazing to watch, right? And Max says that there's going to be a big tailgate party, that Gary Patterson will be there, Trayvon Boykin will be there, all the players, or a lot of the players from that 2014 team. And it's going to be hosted by the Block T Association, which is a Letterman's Association that's not technically officially like associated with the university. But there's not going to be a on-field celebration or it appears any sort of public acknowledgement of that team during the game. And we're coming up on, this is the 10-year anniversary. It's been a decade since they went on that outstanding run, got left out of the college football playoff. And Max says there's two reasons for that. The first one is because he says Gary Patterson, there's still feelings between both parties that haven't completely waned. Obviously, it didn't end in the best way possible, right? They let GP go. He wasn't happy about that. He still thought he could coach at a high level. He's been to a couple different stops since then, at Texas for a year, and then was at Baylor for an off season in a weird situation where he was an analyst and he decided to move on. And then the other issue, according to Mac, is Trayvon Boykin and just his past since he left TCU. He had the arrest at the Alamo Bowl where he got in a fight with a police officer in San Antonio. Of course, Bram Kohlhausen stepped in and rallied that team from 31-0. They won that game. And then had a couple of arrests since then, one of them being an aggravated assault of his girlfriend, and he was convicted and spent some time in prison for that. And Mac makes the point in the article, and I'd say the same thing. Obviously, that was a horrible crime. There's no getting around it. And Trayvon served his time for that. He served his punishment for that. And I understand the school, I guess, being careful about it's complicated celebrating someone with that type of crime in their past. You can't take that back. There's no way to really repair some of those issues. But at the same time, what I would say is it's a complicated issue. It feels like, though, like if TCU is not going to honor the 2014 team specifically because of that, then I think they need to come out and make a statement and say, hey, this is how we feel about it. We're taking a stand against this crime, and we don't feel like we feel like it disqualifies him specifically from being able to be celebrated with the team. But Trayvon Boykin was not the only player on that roster. There were a lot of guys on that roster that played at a high level that since then have represented the university in a great way. I will say, Trayvon had an interview with Mac Engel where he sounded like he's trying to turn his life around. He's making strides to, be a better person and be productive in society and all those things. But there's other guys on this team that they feel kind of slighted that the team itself is not going to be celebrated at this game. I saw Robert Thompson, former lineman for the Frogs. He sent out something on social media, and he was like, this is disappointing that we're not going to be recognized by TCU officially. He says we're confused and hurt, and he says that would be the understatement of the century by saying they're confused and hurt. And Kevin White, former corner on that team, shared something similar. And then the Gary Patterson angle is fascinating too, because I understand there's feelings there, but I think both parties should be able to get past that in order to say, hey, this group accomplished amazing things on the field. And taking 2 minutes to bring them out there and have them wave to the fans and let them get a standing ovation, like, that's deserved. And these things that are in the way of that shouldn't stand in the way of that happening, right? So it's a difficult situation. I think it's a miss by TCU. Now, I will say an update on this. Robert Thompson, former lineman, went on to say that these other teams that are being honored, the 84 Bluebonnet Bowl team and the 94 team, they're also not getting official recognition on the field. But it sounds like the 2014 team thought that was what was going to happen, and they're sort of getting the rug pulled out from under them. And that's unfortunate. And I think TCU didn't handle the situation with care, and obviously didn't communicate super well with the guys that are coming to the game and say, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is why we feel like we can't do, an on-the-field celebration. I don't know. It just feels like a big miss by the university leadership by either not having them there on the field or not communicating clearly, like, this is how we feel and this is why. Unfortunate situation all the way around. We'll come back and get some of your thoughts on yesterday's show here on Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. PrizePicks. You can download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege and get $50 off get $50 when you place a $5 wager. Again, $50 when you place a $5 wager. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. They have over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. And it's not picking like traditional lines of games. You basically pick over-unders based on people's stat totals. So do you think Justin Jefferson is going to get more than 83 yards passing this week or receiving this week? You just go over-under on bets like that. You can download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege. One $5 wager gets you $50 in opportunities. PrizePicks. It's an exciting way to get involved in the sports betting game. PrizePicks. Download the app today. Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. So I kind of previewed that TCU and Texas Tech game earlier this week, and I said I think it's going to be a shootout. I feel like we're going to see a lot of points scored, and it might just come down to which defense can force a few turnovers, who can get the most stops. I also ask you, with this being a rivalry game, what's the rivalry game that you personally care most about, or the team that you want to beat the most? Is it Baylor? Is it Texas Tech? Is it SMU? And Richard Berry says, I think the most satisfying win for me was Texas every year, but in this new conference, the must-wins are Baylor and SMU. Yeah, the Texas wins were awesome. I feel like the thing about Texas was they never reciprocated the rivalry, right? So like it was a big game for TCU every year, and I loved getting those victories over them in Big 12 play, but never felt like the Texas fan base or that program really saw TCU as their equal, even when TCU was beating them on a regular basis. But I totally get your point. Those are my favorite memories. That win on Thanksgiving in 2012 was big. I mean, they just destroyed them in 2014 and 2015. That was a lot of fun. There was that 50-7 victory. That was crazy. Had some upsets. Max Duggan went into Austin in that COVID season, got it done. He also was a true freshman, had that victory in 2019. Some huge wins against Texas through the years that really stand out. But, yeah, they never totally reciprocated the rivalry. Travis says he thinks Baylor is the one. Yeah, Baylor's the one for me. Part of that's just my family ties, like knowing people that went there and having a lot of friends that went there. The bragging rights aspect of it is definitely centered around Baylor for me, and I know that rivalry had a lot of juice a decade ago with the teams that we're talking about in the last segment. Tanner says this game is you got to run. Tech does not have a great line. TCU needs to get those backs going and give them confidence. And Tech is a must-win because he says that's his hometown. I didn't know you're from Lubbock, Tanner. That's awesome. I would love for this TCU run game to get going. You're right. From a stats perspective, this Tech D-line, I know they're banged up. Their front seven has really struggled against the run. So you would think this would be a week to get it going. But TCU has struggled to run the ball against just about everybody. Now, I will say Trent Battle looked good in limited action, so maybe getting him more involved could help this run game. But, yes, you're right. I think one way to sort of tip the scales, which I wouldn't say I expect this because it's just not really in Kendall Brow's nature, but if you're able to slow down this offense and have some long drives that chew up clock, sometimes the best way to help your defense is just to keep the other offense off the field and balance out that time of possession, put more pressure on Tech when they do have opportunities to go score because they know you can run the ball and kind of control things when you get it back in your hands. So that would be massive. If they can find a way to run the ball successfully this week, that would be huge. I'm kind of skeptical given how much they've struggled to run the ball in general. Frog fan says, I've only been a Horned Frog fan for 3 years. Baylor matters decently to him, but the Iron Skillet game he thinks is going to grow as SMU becomes a program in Power 5. Well, I would agree with you, except there's a timeline on this because the Iron Skillet's going to end, I believe, after next year. So maybe the two teams will play again eventually. But, yeah, I do think with them being the ACC and getting better, that could be a game that's a lot more fun. But it doesn't look like they're going to play it every year because TCU wants that built-in kind of guaranteed home game each and every season. So they're getting away from the SMU series. Mountaineer Mike says K-State is the game that means the most to him. He always feels like they have TCU's number. He expects to beat Texas Tech and Baylor. Yeah, Kansas State fans are annoying just in my limited experience with them. And between the Big 12 championship loss and then getting embarrassed in Manhattan last season, I definitely have a desire to get victories against the Wildcats. But to me, it's just not a rivalry game just because the proximity's not there. But I understand why you've developed a dislike for them. And then Sam Morgan says TCU and Tech's old school scores weren't shootouts. They were often single digits and 0 in the first few decades. Yeah, I guess I was kind of liberal in the use of old school. I just meant the Big 12 has changed a lot. So kind of going back to like the mid-2000s and then 2010 through 2015-ish, where you had a lot of those air raid concepts and they were still super successful within the league. Defenses were having issues finding ways to slow it down. So you had those crazy games with big time scoring. But yeah, of course, like back in the day, there were lower scoring affairs as football in general just was. So I was referring to sort of Michael Leach era football is what I was talking about. So it'll be intriguing to see what happens though this week. We'll have coverage of it tomorrow and then a post-game show on Saturday. It's Locked on Horned Frogs, your team. We do it here every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.